If you're enjoying Gems with Shom, follow the show. We're just getting started. Welcome to Gems with Shom, a show about beat digging, records, and other things. Today, I'm joined by Jaeki Cho, ex-hip-hop journalist and world traveler. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I love how you kind of transition into this, like almost like a jazz radio DJ personality and the way that you were breaking down each phrase.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
it.
some people tell me I talk slow. I mean, I like to take it slow. I think that's a better way to communicate sometimes. You got to be yourself.
Totally.
Yeah. You are a hip-hop guy, a Queens representative, right?
Yes.
You are a fantastic storyteller. You're great on social media. And I knew you'd be an interesting person to talk to. I knew we'd have a great conversation.
Yeah, man. I mean, looking forward to it. Like I saw, when you reached out to me, I saw like Rich Medina's face and I was like, oh shit. Like, all right, cool. Like, who is this guy? Like, what is this about? So I got to tap in.
Yeah, appreciate that. I happen to get good guests like yourself. So
Yeah.
It seems to be working out. You are from Queens, New York, originally from Korea. Am I right?
That's right.
Tell me about how you grew up.
So I wasn't born in the States. I'm a naturalized, proud U.S. citizen who first arrived to the U.S. in the late 90s as a young adolescent. Like I had an first generation immigrant upbringing growing up in Queens during the late 90s. Initially attending public school, and then I transferred to a private school, but it was all within like a 15-minute proximity from where I lived on 75th Street, right off Roosevelt Avenue. For those that know, that's a prominent like hub for transportation. Like a lot of different trains go through that particular pocket. So I would say, I had access to a lot of different types of cultures. I consider that pocket of Queens like the modern day Ellis Island. Like if you're an immigrant, Queens has two airports, right? LaGuardia and JFK. So as soon as you land, you settle in one of those areas that has good access to trains. And as a result, it's also very much a transit community because when my family was there were like the Koreans had started to move out. And you started to see a lot more Southeast Asian businesses started to pop up. I'm talking like Thai and, some like inklings of Indonesian. So my family moved out of there in the mid 2000s. And by the time that, I started to visit again as a young adult, I started noticing a huge influx of Nepali, Tibetan, communities from that part of the world, like people from Bhutan, So it's that type of a neighborhood, and also had a huge like South American influence as well, a huge Colombian population that eventually morphed into an Ecuadorian population. And as of late, within the last like decade or so, because of the situations that's been happening in Venezuela, I noticed a huge growth of the Venezuelan community. So yeah, it was a very much a multicultural, ethnic community that, we got exposed to so many different cultures. And one of the underlying thread, the connector of it all, for many people, for many kids during that era in the late 90s and 2000s was the omnipresence of hip hop. You know what I mean? So, and some of it, but many were casual listeners, like, oh, like, yo, the new Jay-Z and the 50 Cent record dropped. And some became more so infatuated with the genre and, like started digging into the crates and started wanting to know everything about the particular production, about the samples that were behind the records. and the stories and the lores behind the artists, behind these, musical outputs. And, I kind of fall into the latter.
Late 90s, Queens, New York, pretty good place to be in the world for hip hop music. Some of my favorites, some of our audience's favorites, Mobb Deep, Nas, world famous legendary rappers, Nori. How did that atmosphere of hip hop in this very multicultural place that you grew up, how did it feel to be around that?
Honestly, when you were in it, when you were growing through that environment, it's hard for you to know anything else. And this is also this is before social media. I mean, internet has started to become way more accessible. It went from broadband to cable around that period. So, you know, we went from copping bootleg CDs and tapes to now you had the access to P2P formats where you could download ripped off versions of music from multiple different eras and generations. Like you no longer needed like an older brother for you to put you on to the Rakim record.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you could just watch BET and see your favorite rappers talking about Rakim and go on Kazaa and type in Eric B and Rakim, and now you had access to that. So, I think plus like, but at the same time, like traditional radio was still very much dominant,
Yeah.
and it was almost inescapable, right? So so it was an interesting period where you still had um like physical assets that you needed to enjoy music, but also it was a period when you started to get a glimpse of what the internet could provide for you that was accessible in a worldwide scale. So I think it was an exciting time, if anything, right? Because I was still skipping lunch to save lunch money so I could go buy like the latest Nas CD, or, later on as I started to dig into like the okplayer.com forums, I got exposed to a bunch of like backpack, more deep cut um, music that expanded beyond my immediate New York gangster rap, thug mixtape,
Yeah.
like that atmosphere. Literally, it went from that atmosphere to listening to the Rom Sayers atmosphere. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So, but I still had to cop these CDs, right? So it wasn't just like, oh, like I could go on Bandcamp. You know what I mean? Because it was before that, before SoundCloud, before any of that. So, it was still like there was still this excitement of digging and looking, and getting exposed to new music, right? I remember the first time I went to Fat Beats, like in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And, as a kid from Queens, taking the train, uh, going all the way to the West Village was like, it's like Odysseus, you know what I mean? Traveling back to his homeland. Like you didn't know what kind of situations you're gonna, bump into. It's like that record that I mean, you mentioned Mobb Deep earlier, but if you listen to that record, Trife Life is
Yeah.
about, they're going from Queensbridge to Bed-Stuy and, and, and it was like they're risking their lives, you know what I mean? So you kind of had that sense of excitement, like going to Fat Beats and going to some of the record stores, um, and even going to certain neighborhoods in Brooklyn where you could get, like, for instance, like I remember actually going to Fulton Street as a young adult, was as not even a young adult, I was like in high school, Asian kid from Queens that had no connection in Brooklyn, going into at the time like the mecca of shopping in Brooklyn, so you could cop like certain mixtapes. Yeah, it was like, that was a bit nerve wracking, right? Because you stand out, as a young kid navigating these streets, especially, this was during the peak of my, real hip hop boom bap era where I had very much like tonal earth tone hoodies with the big ass headphone. You know what I mean? So yeah, man, I definitely have fond memories of, those moments. And music was definitely a huge part of my upbringing and how it shaped my identity.
You went into hip hop journalism. Tell me about the path into that.
So I've had aspirations of being in the music industry. So when I was in high school, I got connected to some underground hip hop artists that were Korean Americans. This artist named Snacky Chan, who was active in the Boston underground scene. And in Boston at the time, there was a shop called Underground Hip Hop, and there was a website called undergroundhiphop.com. So I learned about this artist, Snacky Chan, through other mutual friends and mentor figures. And somehow I got connected to him. So I started rolling with him as like his low done, right? Like I was
Yeah.
like doing street team work for him. And so I started just seeing how an independent artist that looked like me, who was moderately successful in the East Coast underground scene was, living his life. And I realized like, man, this shit's not fly at all, B. You know what I mean? Like this does not look like a Ja Rule video. You know what I mean? Like so this ideal of becoming a rap musician or becoming somebody who is a prominent figure in the rap music industry, it kind of like dawned on me that this doesn't seem like it's an easy trajectory. Not saying like I wanted anything to be simple, but it wasn't a clear path. And then when I got to college, I met this gentleman who was at the time a senior editor at Complex, who has had, different stints at Vibe and various other hip hop zines. And this gentleman, his name is Donnie Kwok, who is still a very close friend of mine. Um, so I basically asked him like, "Yo, can I come and intern for y'all?" And that, I was picking up the editor in chief's like laundry. I was like, I was waiting online at Shake Shack when they only had one location in Madison Square Park for like 2 hours to pick up like burgers for the editorial staff. So I was doing very like menial, low level internship work, but it kind of opened my eyes to an entire industry of rap journalism, hip hop media, and so yeah, like that, I was totally engulfed in that culture throughout college. And when I graduated, I was able to land a job at XXL Magazine, which was a prominent hip hop magazine that I grew up reading alongside Source and Vibe and what have you. So when I started working in that industry, it was also toward the tail end of the glory era of print magazine, right? So I
Yeah.
kind of like entered these industries when the shit wasn't popping. You know what I mean? So Double XL was like pretty much a sinking ship at the time. And they were so antiquated because at the time they were still being published by a traditional publisher, Harris, that they didn't understand the internet.
Okay.
Like they would tell me, my title was senior online editor. They would tell me like, "Yo, don't put the entire cover story in its entirety. Put up half and suggest people to go buy the magazine." This was like 2012, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm about to lose this job." Like, yo, like yo, man, like they haven't figured this shit out yet. So I did that for 2 years, and it was getting to a point where me writing up on what Nicki Minaj said to Mariah Carey for American Idol was so far beyond from how I imagined my career of being a music journalist was. You know what I mean? Like, cause I was envisioning like, oh, I get to like interview artists that I find interesting and get to write, actual music criticism. But that wasn't the case. And I think most hip hop rap journalists that entered the game around that time, we all look at like John Caramanica from the New York Times is like, yo, you have everybody's dream job, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because we wanted to be doing what you're doing, but
Right.
most people, well, John's pen game is just impeccable, right? So I'm not even gonna front like I ever had, the level and the skill set and the just the overall um understanding of music holistically as he does. But that wasn't going to pan out for me. So I decided to leave, and I've been dabbling into different ventures and businesses ever since. And, more than 10 years later, I'm here talking with you, um, known as a content creator on social media.
Yeah. Well, looking back at everything you said, it all kind of adds up to something because you learn storytelling. You are a New Yorker, you're exposed to different cultures, and that brings you to where you are today. So many people who watch the show, maybe they know who you are, maybe they don't. Tell the audience a little bit about what you do.
So now I tell people, uh, my mom tell her friends that I'm a YouTuber because that's a format that they understand.
Yeah.
But if I meet someone like yourself, I tell them, hey, I'm a content creator.
Yeah.
And the past few years, I was able to carve out a particular niche on social media as somebody who champions small mom and pop restaurants through my channel, Righteous Eats, where we highlight a lot of small mom and pop restaurants that don't have the visibility, don't have, VC funding to scale, that didn't get access to PPP loans during the pandemic, and try to champion those that are underrepresented. And as of late, I've been doing a lot more content that revolves around travel and the reflections and the perspectives I was able to acquire and gain from those moments abroad, and just more like cultural commentaries on things that I find interesting or things that I feel like it needs to be called out. And yeah, that's what I've been doing as of late.
What struck me when I came across your work online is your storytelling ability, your
Mm.
insights, your interesting points of view without being preachy. Your approach to world travel is amazing. It's so compelling. The storytelling, the places you go, your open mindedness, your view as a foreigner, how you're received, how different travelers are received. I think it's extremely interesting. And it's something that's kind of missing these days. There's been maybe a decline in TV shows related to this kind of travel for whatever reason. And now it's through social media and YouTube. You're as good as anyone on TV and you're doing it yourself. And I think this is the new world. The format of Anthony Bourdain, I don't know if the same thing could easily exist. I would like it to, but that's just not the world we're in. So someone taking storytelling into their own hands, I really want to commend you on that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, like I think the natural progression of going from a curious, just an inquisitive, multicultural kid growing up in Queens to being obsessive over hip hop, a genre that is pretty much an open format because sampling allows you to tap into so many different genres. So it's a wide open canvas. I think it just makes natural. It just makes perfect sense that the natural progression it eventually leads to the work that figures like Bourdain to Zimmern have done when it comes to showcasing multiculturalism and utilizing food, which is a medium that is nonpartisan, is
Yes.
something that everybody has to consume to survive, but it also shapes and identifies and defines so much about a particular group of people. Yeah, because it's all encompassing. So, yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. And like to your point, I've done some extensive research on how and why the shows of those eras, like the parts unknowns of the world, like Man versus Food of the world, not Man versus Food specifically. Shout out to Adam Richmond, but I'm talking about Bizarre Foods of the world,
Yeah.
haven't been as prominent. Mine is like, you know, Somebody Feed Phil, and a lot of like CNN shows that pretty much, is anchored around known Hollywood adjacent names.
Yeah.
Uh, and the reason why I think is because they're expensive to produce. Um, and I think attention economy as a whole has been fragmented into so many different verticals that distribution, as you mentioned, is the distribution funnel. It used to be a handful of players allowing how distribution gets massively shared to now it's like Jaeki could reach his couple 100,000 viewers, whereas another creator in Thailand could reach his 10 million YouTube followers. And we don't have to necessarily go through the traditional, the gatekeepers that will allow us to produce a show or cut us a check or get advertisers to fund it, right? So a lot of that has been democratized, but it also means that because it's been democratized, the quality and then the time that used to be allowed to produce an episode of a parts unknown, which like I heard some of the budgets for those type of those each episodic moments, and it was like yo, like there's no way anybody will pay for that these days,
Yeah.
right? It just doesn't make sense, like from a cost, like an ROI perspective,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so yeah, I mean, but who knows, man? I mean, and when I speak with some kids who are Gen Z or even Gen Alpha, the way they consume content is so much different from even your era or my era,
Yeah.
right? I don't even know if they could sit around for an hour to watch an entire, a piece about travel. Like they'll probably like, yo, they just, they probably watch the average version of even that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah, but I definitely want to keep traveling and connect and tell perspectives that are as nuanced as possible because these algorithmic silos really fragment how we perceive the world. Because I think you know, at one point, whether you were a top 40 person or not, um, because radio was so omnipresent and because MTV and some of these channels were so dominant, many of us were generalists, right? You might not be the biggest 50 Cent fan, but you heard in the club
Yeah.
because of the radio, because of TV, because of, what access to media that you had. But now with these algorithmic silos, not only can you just stay within your own chamber and never come out of it when it comes to news media, to perspective media, to opinion media, but also your music. Because Spotify essentially just curates what you want to listen to. So if you are a Brooklyn drill specific gang music connoisseur, your algorithm on Spotify is going to feed you that. So now you don't even know who Sabrina Carpenter is, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't know the top song in the country, like that won multiple Grammys. Like you're just not going to get access to that. So it's in a way, it's you like, in a way, I feel like, wow, that's really empowering, right? Because now you get to curate what you want to listen to. Like, I don't want to listen to fucking Funk Flex drops 20 bombs so that he could break a new record. It's like, nah, I just want to listen to the shit that I want to listen to. So in a way, like, it's like, yo, wow, like now we get to have control of what we want to hear. But at the same time, like the experience of the curation is gone, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with many of the comments you said. I don't think everyone thinks about it that way. A lot of people are making content. It doesn't mean they're making something thoughtful and interesting, not appealing to the lowest common denominator. How did you develop yourself as a storyteller?
I wish I was appealing to more of the lowest common denominator. Like, I wish I could just do a dance video and get a few million views and call it a day. But you know, the training that I had working for a print magazine that was transitioning into a digital platform, the editors that work for these companies, they were still like making sure that some of the editors that I dealt with, they were brutal and tearing up like my 300-word review on Sky Zoo. You know what I mean? Like, so I would do like 10 revisions for this, like, and it really allowed me to understand, how do I have a hook? How do I provide facts? How do I provide nuance? How do I, you know, try to showcase different perspectives? And if you really think about it, anybody who's had any form of, time they spent reading any prominent newspapers, where time spent reading more than 10 books, or had the privilege of taking one single communications or media literacy class, can tell that, okay, this is an op-ed and this is an actual a fact-based news article, and this is a biased perspective on a headline, and this is actual just statistics. Unfortunately, a lot of that is no longer existent in our culture. And I think that's a lot of those foundational skill sets, or just like perspectives on how I look at things, has helped me to utilize those just like traits into my content creation process. So yeah, when I'm telling a particular narrative, even if it's about, like, for instance, there's one video that I did about, you know, healthcare, like how I compared why U.S. healthcare fucking sucks compared to, any other major country with, high GDP. I knew that I had to tie it in with a personal hook that makes it authentic to me. So I talked about my wife's recent experience dealing with it. And I anticipate what the comments are going to say so that I could construct a narrative and bring it back to, here are all these examples that you could pull from. Even if I do that, because the attention span is so short, like, even though I explain everything in that 2.5 minute, or maybe even a 2 minute video, you're going to get comments like, oh, you missed this. But I'm like, nah, like, I literally said it in like a minute and 45. You just didn't watch it until that point. You know what I mean? And you just left the comment, you know what I mean? But I always try to keep that in mind when I articulate it and I share whatever online.
Well, you're applying your training, your education, your job experience as someone with, let's say, journalistic rigor in a different way. So that media, or let's say medium that you worked in, is no longer happening. There is no double XL. And now you changed your channel to a new way that's maybe empowering to you. And that's a good thing to see.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about what's possible now versus in the past. Well, I liked watching Anthony Bourdain a lot. And it's hard to duplicate that today for all the reasons that you said. And part of that, well, it sucks. First, he's no longer here. Secondly, it's hard to have another thing like that because of the, let's say, landscape you outlined. But there's a plus side. There's a plus side if you look for it. There's a plus side for you.
Totally.
Plus side for me. Plus side for anyone who chooses to do anything, right? Totally. And yeah, I mean, like, you found your path. You're certainly very popular. You do a great job. And, I'm not saying it's easy, but there's less things in the way. It's democratic, as in the fact that if you're good, you'll find a way. And, with this channel, this show, I only started maybe just over 6 months ago, and it's going great. And now when I listen to our earlier episodes, do I cringe a little bit? Yeah, they suck, but it's my job, and I enjoy trying to get a little bit better every time. Talk to people like yourself and get better next week and the next week, and take myself as far as I can. And whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, totally.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's all about getting your reps in, right? Yeah. This is like the easiest. Okay, maybe not the easiest, but it's definitely one of the best times in human history where, if you have an intention to do something, you have the tools and you have an audience and you have the access in order for you to scale. so I always tell folks that ask me like, yo, how do you do what you do, and like, how did you get to where you got to? I remind them, by the way, bro, like I'm like peanuts. I'm like tiny in terms of the overall ecosystem of content creators. But one of the things I kind of remind myself, and especially as of late, because it also took me a bit of an evolution and metamorphosis for me to kind of get to this stage where I tell myself like, oh, like I'm basically running a bodega. Like it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if it rains, it doesn't matter if it snows, it doesn't matter if I had a bad day. I got to put up a video because the bodega has to open. And if one video goes viral, it's like, well, the bodega was busy that day. But the next day, I have to just go back to selling coffee. That's kind of how I look at it. And once I started to look at it from that perspective, everything else aligns in the sense that if you want to become a better bodega owner, a better basketball player, whatever, like whatever field that you want to focus on, you just got to get your reps in. And the more reps you put in, the better you get at. You know what I mean? It's just really that's just simple as it is. And of course, like social media and all of these channels, whether it's Riverside all the way to podcast platforms, they they reward consistency because they also need you to work for them. You know what I mean? To feed their channels, to feed their machine, right? So I just tell people to just put up more shots. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Hell yes. Hell yes. Tell me about where you got your passion for travel.
So I was born in Korea, but then I lived in China for a few years before my family moved to the States.
What part of Korea? What part of China? We can get specific
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah. So I was born in the outskirts of Seoul, Korea,
Okay.
and I lived there for up until I was like 6 or 5 or 6. And I moved to Nanjing, China, which is also like a few hours away from Shanghai. A
Okay.
lot of people know Nanjing for the unfortunate like Nanjing massacre the Japanese have, done during World War II, where I guess before World War II. But yeah, so that was the city I was at, and then I moved to Queens, which was specifically a part of Queens that is just extremely multicultural and multi-ethnic. So I think the ideal of traveling, the ideal of wanting to experience different cultures, uh, opened up for me in a way through just migration. Like, it wasn't like, um, yeah, it wasn't like, my parents had the means to take us on like a spring break trip to Paris. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't the case with me. It was more so that, oh, like, my homie, he's Colombian and he's putting me on to like sancocho. Oh, okay, cool. Like Colombians eat this type of stew and soup. Oh, okay, like yo, like that kind of reminds me of this thing in my Korean in Korean cuisine. Um, and I think being able to like developing a very amiable palate at a young age, um, kind of just knock down this fear of wanting to go to places that might appear as uh might appear a lot different than whatever you come from. And of course, like I didn't have the means in my 20s to hit the road as much as I want to now, as much as I'm doing now. But one of the things I told myself is like, yo, once I kind of figure out the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is food, shelter, and clothing, like my expenses and what I want to index heavily into is traveling. Um, because I find that more like, everybody has their wants and needs. For some people is having a great car. For some people is collecting timepieces. For me, it's like, yo, like I'll travel, bro. Like, you know, I want to go to Mongolia. You know what I mean? Like that's how I want to spend my time.
Oh, that's amazing. I have a great passion for travel. There's been times in my life where I've traveled a lot into many
Yeah.
interesting places. And there's times when I've traveled less. That's just the flow of life. So it does a little bit of astral traveling watching you, right? I could get that mental picture, and it's something to inspire me for next time. So I think it's
Amazing.
really great what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Where's the last place you traveled to for pleasure?
Interesting. Azerbaijan.
Oh wow. I really
Yeah.
wanted to go to Azerbaijan. What were you doing over there?
It was like a guy's trip, like a crew trip. Friend of mine getting married.
Azerbaijan.
I wouldn't call it a bachelor party, but it
Right.
was like a bachelor party, as in we tend to travel a lot. So we went to Azerbaijan. There was a part of it that was in Georgia
Right.
that I missed, but I went to Baku, Azerbaijan, which is extremely affluent place.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, they got oil,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's definitely affluent. But I'm curious because there really isn't that much discussed about Azerbaijan, right? Like it's
yeah. We just had a group chat going,
right.
and then we're like, "What about Azerbaijan?" And then that's it. It's
That's
not
fine.
really like clear whose idea it was even. And we've made a lot of like we have a group of friends been traveling together for years. A lot of random decisions have been made, and then we're like, okay, let's do it. So it was a great opportunity to see it, and it was very eye opening because I had no idea what I was getting into, and I kind of wanted to be surprised. Right, I was quite busy in life. I was just like, let's just go and enjoy and see what's up. And it was very affluent, very interesting, totally unique culture,
Right.
really deep culture, and colorful, beautiful city and great food. I mean, it was good. I mean, I had a great time there.
Man, I'll take your suggestion for it, man. I might need to put that on my list of places to hit up.
Yeah. Well, on that same trip, I went to Istanbul, which was one of the greatest places I've ever been in my life, as
Yeah.
in architecture, insane views, food, culture,
Yep.
really diverse. I want to go back. I only went for 3 days. I'd like
Yeah.
to go back. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
spent like a week there back in 2022. I went back last year for another week and a half. And I think it's definitely one of my favorite cities in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what has all this traveling taught you?
Um, I think there are a lot more similarities than differences. That's definitely a key takeaway, and it's a constant reminder as well. Um, that no place is perfect. You know what I mean? Like every society I go to, I'm reminded that humans will never feel like they have everything they need. They're gonna constantly yearn for more. You know what I mean? Like, cause when I'm in the outskirts of Mongolia, I see young boys that haven't washed their hair for maybe a week, and they're like on a horse, but they're looking at like Instagram on their phone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? And I speak to some of them, and I tell them I'm from New York, and they have this incredible fantasy about New York. Um, but they live in a part of Mongolia that they still kind of participate in pretty much like a like a like quarterly nomadic lifestyle, right? Um and I think some people might look at that as aspirational, right? Like you get this entire wide open step in front of you. Um, but for them, they probably want to see what they saw on like Spider-Man. You know what I mean? And then I come back to New York from that. Like I'm like, wow, okay, cool. The accessibility that I have and the multiculturalism that I have, oh, that was amazing. And then I go to a place like Singapore, where it's extremely safe, clean. Um, the way that the government deals with its populace outside of this conversation about freedom of speech is, for me, it looks like it's flawless,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of traits about it that I'm sure people could argue, but yeah, like about the caning, about, execution, yeah, all of that. I'm sure there's a lot more nuances that goes into it. But for me, just from a relationship between its citizens and the actual ruling party, like I feel like it's a very fair exchange, right? But then I talk to some of the younger folks over there, and they're like, "Yo, it's such a stuffy society. It's a boring society. There's nothing going on. It lacks culture." But then I kind of remind them, like, "Yo, bro, like, I almost got shot." You know what I mean? Like I've seen somebody that get killed in front of me on Church Avenue in Flatbush in 2015. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I still think about that moment, and they're like, "What?" Like,
Yeah.
because guns are pretty much like non-existent to the average citizen over there. And I tell them like, "Yo, like our subway system have rodents that are this big on the platforms, and we take it for what it is, and we still pay $3 to take a subway ride." And they're like, "Wait, what?" Like, you know what I mean? So it just kind of reminds you like, oh, it's all perspectives, you know? No society is perfect. Uh, so I think that's another big takeaway for me is that, what we look at as outdated and, antiquated and, non-functioning might just be a haven and might be a haven for a certain type of people. What we see as high tech, highly developed might be hell for some other people. You know what I mean? So it's just that. And so it really allows you to just be more sympathetic towards people, like, and even if you travel within the United States, right? You come from Toronto, which is a multicultural, multi-ethnic, and plus y'all Canadian, so y'all just nicer. You know what I mean? Like you're just nicer people. And I come from Queens, which is also like the epicenter of multiculturalism. So for us to use our own prejudice about how America or how Canada should be, it's very much in its own bubble compared to somebody from Arkansas, right? Like, and of course they're gonna have a certain type of perspective that's vastly different from mine, right? And that's another thing that it just I kind of remind myself, like, when I visited like San Antonio, Texas, I was like, oh shit, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, what? Like, all of y'all had kids when y'all were 17? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh shit, okay, got you. Oh, okay, so you have a different perspective. It's like, oh, the nearest grocery store that you could go to in your Chevy pickup is 15 minutes away. It's like, oh, okay, like, no wonder y'all have like have a certain type of lifestyle. Like, oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, oh, no wonder y'all want to have to protect your Second Amendment rights. You know what I mean? Like, so those type of things really just starts to make a lot more sense the more you travel.
Have you gotten any challenging situations in all of your travels?
Um, Knock on wood, not yet.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, I have not yet. You know what I mean? But there are certain places that I don't. I'll probably try to test out the waters before I tell my wife. It's like, all right, cool, we should roll together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there are certain parts of like Colombia or certain parts of Mexico, even, or certain parts of even like Southeast Asia that I'll probably want to tap in first and kind of, understand the lay of the land before, I tell my wife, like, all right, cool, we could roll together. So
Yeah.
that's
I
just
hear
something
you.
to keep in mind.
I hear you. I think it's always good to respect where you are, especially if
Right.
you don't know the streets. If you go to even many American cities, a lot of American cities, if you're in the wrong place, you just shouldn't be there generally,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Right.
Totally.
So when you go somewhere new, you got to be hyper aware of that. And yeah, I'd say I've had some trouble at different times. I've traveled a lot. I'll just note that I travel with a bunch of guys and there's drinking and all kinds of things could happen.
Yeah.
Nothing really bad has happened, but we've gotten like just dumb scenarios. Uh, no one's life has been endangered. So
Right, 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 right.
it's
Well,
good.
that's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Have you faced any racism as a Korean American traveling in all of these parts of the world?
Yeah, like I recently made a video about this because when I was in Morocco, when you're in the souks, a lot of the shopkeepers, their job is to try to get your attention. So they see an Asian face walking down, they're gonna throw out any Asian affiliated, phrase or character. I mean, I haven't actually gotten like a single Jackie Chan. It was all like, ni hao and konnichiwa, you know what I mean? Which again, like I didn't feel like they were harmless, right?
Yeah,
They were harmless. Um, and it was similarly, but they were harmless and but I would say, I've had moments in Colombia and Kenya where it wasn't necessarily threatening, but it was more so like ignorance in the sense of like they really just don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and but when I'm in Europe and I hear like inklings of, you know, uh uh like racist remarks. Like I was in Bologna, Italy recently, and me and my wife, we were just walking down the street, and these two dudes on the corner, like for no reason, they just started going like, ching chong, like you know what I mean? And I was like what context, like made you feel that you have the audacity to do that, right? Um, but again, like even within that situation, I try to understand why he did that because he probably never been checked by an Asian person before,
yeah,
right? Like he never probably seen an Asian person, call him out on his bullshit.
yeah,
Maybe the Chinese restaurant owner in Bologna, Italy, deal with it and suck it up and never had to like, get into any sort of a combative situation with this person.
yeah,
So yeah, like like when I experienced that like in Europe, like I kind of like, oh, okay. Like, like you've definitely seen an Asian person before me, but you're just trying to be smart, you know what I mean? But when I'm in certain countries where like, yeah, like the likelihood of your experience with an Asian person is strictly through media, then yeah, like I try to take it with a little bit more grace.
yeah. I think that's very intelligent of you, very worldly of you. And it's fair for you to be upset. It's fair, but I've seen scenarios like that happen to me. It's fair to be upset, but I just think about it. What is the advantage? I mean, I'm in that country. Why not make the best of it? Why let something like that upset you or throw you off? And just because this individual was in the wrong, it doesn't paint the whole country. It's one asshole one day. Right.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like and it is the same argument that I like to make about, when I visited Turkey, I've received some, direct messages from people that were affected by Turkey's former international affairs, like
Yeah.
during their Ottoman times, even during their time, as Turkey, the country,
Yeah.
or even now, right?
Yeah.
So
They have
like
some challenges recently. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, like, even now. So, like, yeah, some Armenians were in the DMs like,
Yeah.
"Yo, what's up? Like, what you doing over there in Turkey?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Yo, like, I get the tragedy that happened with your people tied to this government and its overall social structure is horrible, but that doesn't define the entirety of the culture and its people that lives day to day and just, try to make ends meet so they could afford a glass of tea." You know what I mean? Like, I mean, and my argument to that person would be like, oh, okay, cool. So, the ongoing meme and the trend is like, oh, everybody's going to Japan. Oh, you think like we like, you know what I mean? Like you think every Southeast Asian and East Asian country mobilize and DM y'all for going to Japan? You know what I mean? Like the logic kind of falls apart, right? And we could make the same argument about America or the
Right.
United States, right? Like, so what? Like every time somebody posts a picture with the Statue of Liberty, like somebody from El Salvador and what I mean? Like these
Yeah.
Central American Panama is gonna hit you and say, "Yo, what's up with that?" Like,
Yeah.
come on,
Yeah.
like,
I have the very much the same point of view. I look at it as like I'm a citizen of the world. I
right?
have a great background, Indian background, Canadian background. These are my advantages. And I can't let a political history or even current political state impact my interest in visiting there. Unless it's like at war, I'll pretty much go anywhere in the world. I'm pretty much open to go to any country on this planet.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I agree with you.
Yeah. And especially the part that you said about the people. I mean, just because some government is doing X, Y, or Z, you cannot assume that represents the view of everyone there, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I find the best way to get to know people is through talking about music.
Nice.
You are a music guy. You are ex-hip hop journalist, which I find a very humorous way to describe yourself. Maybe
Because
true.
yeah, like I'm you know how like retired lawyers say they're like recovering lawyers.
Yeah.
I call myself like a recovering hip hop writer because
Yeah.
I think I maxed out on my consumption of rap during my tenure as a rap journalist. Like I literally after I quit Double XL, I think I stopped listening to rap for a good 2 years. Like I think all I listened to was the Coltrane's, Alice and John, and like just a bunch of like Bobby Humphries records to like detox, you know what I mean? All the rap out of my system.
Okay. Great. No, I'm glad you mentioned those are some of my favorites. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
This segment is called Drop a Gem on Them. It's
uh,
everyone's favorite part of the show. It's a word association game. Tell me what comes to mind, a feeling, an experience, a personal story, an anecdote, really anything.
mm,
I'll name songs, artists, places, spaces. To start, John Coltrane, Naima.
ooh, I use the shit out of that record for a lot of my videos. Um, it's yeah, like it's one of the best Coltrane records. I mean, it was definitely during his Atlantic years, right? So, and I mean, like Naima, like I think most people associate Coltrane for Love Supreme, right? That's like his classic. That's his Illmatic. But Naima it provides a certain sentiment, whereas like Love Supreme is like his spiritual
Yeah.
reckoning, right? Like that's something that you burn an incense to. Whereas Naima is something that, you sip like cognac, you know what I mean? Where you reflect. Um, it's a type of emotion that always like lingers when you listen to it. You know what I mean? Just as soon as like when the horn kicks in the very intro. Um, yeah, so it's one of those records that I haven't done enough research on the inception of it just because just like any other like, you know, casual jazz fans, like Love Supreme is like the record that I pretty much even today, I think I probably played it early in the morning. Um, but Naima is a record that, like I instantly fell in love with when I heard it. And, I've been using, and it's a great record for me to utilize for these type of like introspective, message driven short form videos that I create.
Yeah. Great taste. One of my all-time favorite songs. It's interesting the way I learned about jazz backwards, probably like many people. Uh, I learned about this song specifically through a Talib Kweli lyric on a Black Star album
Oh,
where
word.
he
Yeah,
mentions like John Coltrane loved Naima. Naima is John Coltrane's first wife, I believe.
right.
And I was like, okay, maybe that's a good song I should listen to. And then I listened to it and I was so moved by this unbelievable jazz classic. And it's one of my all time favorite songs. It's so sophisticated, so empty, so perfect.
Yep.
It's brilliant. All right. To one of my favorite groups out of Queens,
Uh,
Mobb Deep featuring Cool G Rap, The Realist.
uh-huh. Yeah. Again, that's another that's another song that I use the instrumental a lot for a lot of my videos. It's called A Realist, and it's produced by The Alchemist. Um, And this is like when Alchemist was still a young, I believe, a recent NYU graduate or maybe an NYU student or something adjacent to NYU, where he was really kind of like delving into the entire like Mobb Deep Queensbridge camp. And it's a very simple loop, if you just kind of strip away the record. But if anything, like I look at that record and a lot of the work that Prodigy and Alchemist was doing during that era really kind of was like the foundational anchor that pretty much was like an early interpretation of this new age underground hip hop movement where figures like Rock Marciano and the entire Griselda camp to Mac Hami, like a lot of what those guys and the style iterations that those guys birthed, originated from this era of Alchemist, Mobb Deep, Prodigy, So even like this notion of like not having a hook. I mean, of course, there's like artists that have done records with no hook, like Wu-Tang just has posse cuts with no hooks. But like Prodigy as a solo artist dropped Keep It Thorough, which was also a Alchemist produced single. Um, you know, it's I believe it was probably like one of Alchemist's like first singles that he produced, like a lead single that he produced. It's very like sparse. Um, the snares are like a gunshot, you know what I mean? Um, and yeah, like it's the total anti-commercial record. And the realist does that as well. And like Coogee Rap from Corona, Queens, Prodigy is so gangster that he could rep QB when he's from Hempstead. You know what I mean? Like, um, yeah, like and Prodigy is such a prominent figure amongst any hip hop head or any New York, anybody who's proud to be from New York, anybody who's proud to be from Queens in that particular era or want to be associated with Queens. Prodigy has Prodigy is like a saint. You know what I mean? Like for us, Prodigy is a saint. So yeah, like so that particular record, The Realist is definitely heavily in my rotation.
So well put. Prodigy is a legend. I mean, he's not only a Queens legend, he's one of the best to ever do it. And that song, especially Keep It Thorough, he's in full flight. He's like a star in full flight. And
Totally.
yeah, I think what he said is heavy airplay all day with no chorus.
No chorus, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? I break bread, ribs, and $100 bills, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it definitely gets me in my zone. Whenever I'm doing a race, the two records that I always kind of play some point when I'm running is, Keep It Thorough and probably like Triumph by Wu-Tang, just because I want to feel that sense of victory, even though I might be like doing a marathon in like 5 hours, which is by no means something that most people flex about, but like you want to feel that energy.
Oh, tell me about that. You're a runner. I didn't know that. What got you into running? What type of races have you ran? What's your interest in running?
Uh, I mean, like I run. You know what I mean? I don't tell people I'm a runner. I run. You know what I mean? So I needed to create a disciplined physical. I needed to attach myself to a disciplined physical activity. You know what I mean? In my early 30s, late 20s. And I've dabbled in the gym, I've dabbled in martial arts, but it just wasn't as accessible because the barrier of entry for running is very low. All you need is a pair of sneakers and you could do it. You know what I'm saying? So that was one of the first that's one of the first reasons why I got into running. And at one point I had a sneaker store that I co-owned a sneaker store in Flushing, Queens, where a group of runners wanted to host their weekly run club out of the store. So I had to close the store. So by default, I started running with these guys. Shout out to World's Fair Run Crew out of Flushing, Queens. And also became when I pivoted to become a full-time content creator, I became a partner with On, the Swiss running brand, the Swiss lifestyle athleisure running brand. And now that I'm signed with these guys, yo, if I want to re-up everywhere every year, like yo, I gotta hit the streets. It's about it's almost like part of my job description now. You know what I mean? So and through that experience, I've done New York Marathon 3 times, and I've done the Sydney Marathon once last year, and I plan to do New York again this year. You know what I mean?
I want to congratulate you on that. It takes a huge amount of discipline and willpower. And I think sometimes people just say these things. No one realizes how much goddamn effort and discomfort it takes to do something like that. So
Oh,
yeah.
it's definitely a pain. Definitely a pain. And it's never a fun experience. Like I try to tell myself it gets better, but it hasn't gotten better for me. But the feeling of relief and the feeling of accomplishment after the race, it's the high that I think makes people want to do more.
So let's touch on that. When you finished your first marathon, what was going through your mind?
Uh,
Where were you? Paint a picture.
so after I finished my first marathon, my wife actually showed up to that one. She didn't show up,
New
but
York Marathon? Like
yeah,
what?
New York Marathon. Yeah, it was New York Marathon. Um, yeah, and afterwards, I felt like shit. You know what I mean? Like I felt I was fucking destroyed. I felt like shit. I didn't want her to eat anything. Because yeah, a lot of people think like, oh, after a marathon, like, oh, you must be hungry. It's like, nah, bro, your body is like in shock mode.
Okay.
Like they're like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? So you don't want to eat anything. You just want to, like, for me personally, because the body temperature drops, right? I just wanted to go home and take a hot shower. So that was like a realistic reflection of where my mind state was. And it was pretty much the same for my third marathon, which was last year, which was my third New York marathon, which was last year. My worst experience with a marathon to date was in Sydney last year. I caught like norovirus the day before. So
That's
I
right.
was like, I wasn't shitting on the route, but I took a lot of bathroom breaks.
Yeah.
And norovirus, you're just like, just
That's rough.
having liquid out of your body. So it was one of the most painful experiences I've ever endured.
Yo.
Um, but yeah, man, I persevered. I got the medal. So,
Oh my
but
God.
but I was stuck. So after the marathon, I was supposed to explore Sydney and the surrounding areas, but all those plans pretty much got canceled. So because I was just bedridden for 3 days, and luckily I had access to great Australian healthcare system, which provided the insight for me to create a video about the global healthcare infrastructure in comparison to the United States. So I take that as a positive. You know what I
There
mean?
you go. There you go. Like I said, tangents on this show are welcome. I think that was a good tangent. Next song, Norman Connors. You Are My Starship.
Super like silky, cosmic,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And when I first heard the infamous this was because Infamous dropped in 95. I first came across Mobb Deep, just being fully honest, right? Because I first came across Mobb Deep on the Infamy, which is probably one of their worst albums. You know what I mean? Like, but they had great records on there, like Getaway, and Hey Love with 112. You know what I mean? But
Getaway slept on. That's a banger.
it's a great record. So I kind of did the reverse for a lot of these classic 90s hip hop albums. So I remember listening to the Infamous, and up until that point, because I was still like in middle school, I didn't fully grasp the concept of sampling. So when I heard records like Trife Life or 40's First Eye, Start of Your Ending, I thought when Havoc was the producer, like he's actually composing
Yeah.
and playing the instruments. You know what I mean? So I do have I do remember that record being like, wow, like, yo, like this is such a beautiful record. And then later on, I got introduced like to like what Scratch Magazine. You know what I mean? This is that kind of really started to put a face to the people behind the production. And then, like I started digging into what sampling was. And, I thought about like buying a little like MPC myself to start fucking around with it, but I didn't have like, like my mom wasn't going to pay for a record player and all of that. So, my dreams of becoming a beat maker was completely shattered. But yeah, like, yeah, but one of the beautiful things about like hip hop sampling, especially from that particular era, is how you take something that was probably in the dollar bin, right? Because like, yeah, Norman Connors, or even the Charmels, there's, As Long as I've Got You, those records, if you actually go back and listen to the interviews with these prestigious producers, like they tell you like, oh yeah, I got that shit for like 99 cents, where like I got that shit, because it was like in my uncle's basement or whatever. And those weren't like prominent records. They weren't like Stax records, Isaac Hayes, or Marvin Gaye joints that they probably would have had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to clear. Like these were unknown records that they literally dug through the crates, and because they made it, because of hip hop, these records were able to have an entire new lifespan, right? Um, yeah, so I think like the original record, if you listen to it, is like super like devotional and celestial, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like some,
Celestial, yeah, for sure.
and then he flipped that shit and made it into about them, like go hollering at a shorty in Bed-Stuy, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like risking their lives,
yeah,
risking their lives and shit,
yeah,
So it just straight like I call that shit like asphalt poetry. You know
yeah.
what I mean? And if you listen to that Mobb Deep album, and especially in this weather right now in New York, you put on some like Timberland boots and like you take the train and yo, like the music makes sense. Like you understand why those drums were programmed that way. You understand why they specifically chose that type of sample and flipped it in that type of manner. And that kind of really hit me when I first visited California in my early 20s. Soon as I landed, I was listening to like Big Boy's radio show, because I had a rental car and all that. And I'm on a boulevard, I see palm trees, and I hear like that synthesizer sound from like a G-Funk record. And like Warren G is starting to like whisper on the radio. And I was like, oh, this shit makes sense. Like sonically, it perfectly captures the environment. And I think like the Infamous and records like Trife Life does that for my, for New York.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'd say, Infamous is like it's a soundtrack for Queens to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah. Wu-Tang Clan, Careful, Click, Click.
Was that this record was in what? Was it in the W album?
Yeah, it's on the W. It's
Yeah,
first
yeah,
single off the W.
yeah. I
Or
mean that.
actually, maybe the second one. Maybe Triumph
Yeah.
might have been first. Yeah.
No, Triumph was in Wu-Tang Forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because the W is like the W, and what was the other joint they had? Like the Iron Flag, was it? Um,
Yeah, I'm getting all my Wu-Tang albums mixed up
yeah.
now. Let me
So I
see.
mean, nobody's gonna blame you unless you're like a hardcore Wu-Tang aficionado where you're listening to all the Wu-Tang affiliates.
Yeah,
Like literally after 36 Chambers and Wu-Tang Forever. Every other Wu-Tang group album is like a blur. You know what I mean? Like,
I listened to more of the affiliate albums than the group albums.
oh, you
After
did?
the first one.
That
Yeah.
sounds very Canadian of you. Oh,
Yeah.
no offense.
I'm into this shit. I'm into this shit. Yeah. I was like, I'm into the You God album, like stuff
Like
like
Killer
that.
Army and shit. You know
Right.
what I mean? That's
Killer
yeah, like
Army, Rebel IMS, solo album, all
yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
I'm into
yeah,
all
all
that.
that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, listen, man, like Wu-Tang, like what can you say about Wu-Tang that hasn't already been said? But um you know, the interesting about that particular record is that, and I was talking about this earlier about like Rock Marciano and all of that, is if you just strip away the drums in that record and just like replace it with how they program drums in all these like, you know, like sinister underground rap records of nowadays, like it sounds very much fitting of the times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's very minimal. Um You know, yeah, like I know that because I think about the records like that where like it's like RZA really understood. I don't know if RZA actually even made it, but
Yeah, he did
whether
that.
it was RZA or Mathematics or whoever, like
Yeah.
they really understood the negative space before it was trendy
Yeah.
because so much of their music was about bars. You know what I mean? So they really needed like a canvas for them to just rap.
Yeah.
And I think that cold atmosphere, as I have suggested earlier, is like the blueprint for a lot of like modern, you know, boom bap revivalist, you know, soundscape. But overall, like I want to be, you know, like RZA is somebody who I look up to as.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's all good. RZA is somebody who I look up to as like not only a scholar and a successful musician, but just a pretty much like a modern treasure of a philosopher, um, visionary, but most importantly, as many of the members call him, the abbot, the teacher. You know what I mean? So like I don't even I don't even listen to like Bobby Digital albums, bro. Like I gave it a few pads and I'm like, ooh, this is not the most, you know, pleasurable listening experience. But I'll listen to RZA on a podcast any day. You know what I mean? I'll listen to every RZA interview. You know what I mean? Like, and of course I'll listen to any RZA beats. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of like how I perceive the RZA. And speaking of like multiculturalism and multi-ethnic, and being receptive to so many different ideologies, like yo, RZA was doing that before the internet, before the access to social media. Like he was reading. Like I mean, think about a kid from, you know, the hoods of Staten Island getting access to the I Ching and, you know, reading about philosophies from Lao Tzu to Sun Tzu to Buddha to Muhammad. You know, what I mean, reading the Quran and having an encyclopedic knowledge of kung fu films all the way to not even just kung fu films, just 70s, 80s, and early 90s cinema to the depth that he has is really something that I and his ability to able to articulate all those references into how he morphs and shapes the lifestyle and the outputs that he has. It's something that that I'm really inspired and aspire to be like. You know what I mean? Um, yo, like the whole reason why I have so much of, you know, respect and adulation and and I'm able to be so much more receptive to so many different types of religion, especially the religion of Islam, is because of Wu-Tang. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like the whole 5% ideology. Um, yo, man, I was so obsessed with Wu-Tang. I started, you know, memorizing the supreme mathematics. You know? Like, yo, even look at the hat that I'm rocking
Yeah.
right now. It has had profound impact on who I am and, you know, how I perceive the entire world. And even, you know, even in my videos, I say bong. Like that's
Yeah.
obviously the RZA, right? Um, So yeah, like I think the cultural exchange, like of how like East Asian philosophy and teachings and entertainment and assets that influenced him, like in return, full circle moment that has had profound impact on me. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, it's New York shit. I mean, RZA is a genius of our time. He's one of the greatest things ever happened. And sometimes I think about it, what they were doing was extremely popular and the most uncommercial shit you're ever gonna find. Like
Right.
they were not trying to be pop. They were just amazing and
Yeah.
completely original, which is I think the most underrated part of how original they all were. They all had their own sound, their own style, and he was the architect of it. He had this book, the Wu-Tang Manual. Have you heard of this book?
Yeah, yeah, I have the Wu-Tang
Yeah.
manual, the Tower Vu,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
The
Anything
best.
that he drops, like I try to check in, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, all of that.
Do you remember this song, Eric Sermon React, produced by Just Blaze?
Oh
It
yeah,
was
I
an
know that song. I
Indian.
love that. Yeah, I love that record. I love that record.
Yeah.
So, I know that record well because one, I think the single before that was Just Like Music, like it
Yeah.
was the Marvin Gaye flip that he did, right? And this is like early 2000s. This is when Just Blaze probably made all his money that he has now during this era. Like he was, omnipresent, especially in New York. Um, and the cover of that particular single, Eric Sermon is decked out in Mets gear. Like, and I'm a big Mets fan, so I also associate that with that record. Um, EPMD though was before my time, so my introduction to Eric Sermon and, if anything, Def Squad as a whole was during this era, right? I was a big Redman fan, but that was because of movies like How High, you know what I mean? So it wasn't so yeah, like but one of the things I recall was like they're not sampling just soul, funk, and jazz records. Like the expansion of, when I said earlier about hip hop being an open canvas, I think this record signify that, like the internationalism of what hip hop is. And around this era, there was the Punjabi MC, you know what I mean, that also dropped around the same time. And if you look at like Bollywood, or I guess like just overall like Middle Eastern, I hate that term, but like that's the term that a lot of people understand. So it's you started seeing a lot of producers tapping into that. And I think like a few years later, Madlib dropped this wonderful beat tape, Beat Conductors 3 and 4, which was entirely full of like, it was like Indian Bollywood exploration.
Yeah.
Um, but it definitely expanded my own curiosity for digging, right? Because when I heard like, oh, like this Bollywood sample being utilized, and I grew up in Queens, so I've had like, I wouldn't say close proximity, but like I lived on 75th Street, and 74th Street was Little India. So the scent, the colors, the music, right next to like a gold shop, there was always like a little tape store that had like mad flamboyant looking posters and shit, you know what I mean? And I had like Indian homegirls that would have all the little hand drawings. They would be listening to some shit, and we would just like make fun of it because like like Bollywood movies,
Yeah.
it's a little hard not to make fun of
Yeah.
when you first encounter it,
It's
right?
corny.
So,
Yeah.
but then you listen to the music and then the horn section, the string arrangement is like, yo, this shit is like just straight gold.
Yeah.
But yeah, I say all that to say, like, I think when I heard that record, and looking back, I think that probably triggered my yearning to want to learn more about like Korean records, like Korean psych rock, 70s funk from Korea. And if anything, like I think I got put onto like city pop from the 80s. And I'm not boasting at all. Like I got put onto it early because I was like digging into heavy 70s and 80s Korean like funk, pop rock records. And through that digging process, I kind of like stumbled upon like Yamashita Tatsuro and that whole wave of like bubble economy Japanese city pop, you know, before all these records now cost like $200 a pop, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. That song React, first of all, it's super dope. As an Indian guy, I kind of had mixed feelings at first. I was like,
right,
something about it didn't feel right at the
right,
beginning. And then I got over it. I was like, actually, this is all really good. And it's a positive thing. That brings up a concept that you've mentioned before that I wanted to get into. What does the term third culture mean to you?
um, I think it's an for me now it's an all-encompassing term. Um, you know, the traditional terminology might be uh somebody who is from a multicultural background or multi-ethnic background, uh, or somebody who has grown up in a multicultural environment. Um, but for me, if you look at it from a much more macro lens, all cultures really are third cultures because they all stem from somewhere, and then they're constantly mixing, remixing, you know, like you know what I mean. Like so, if the pilot that I shot called Third Cultures with Jaeki Cho and Prato Italy, it was about the Chinese community that settled in this small city right next to Florence, where they're heavily involved in the garment industry. So a lot of like what you perceive as made in Italy, sure, they're made in Italy, but throughout that production chain, there's probably a Chinese grandma like sewing up your buttons for that $5,000, you know, like Brunello Cucinelli jacket. You know what I mean? And I kind of wanted to share that perspective about how me coming from a place like Queens or a city like New York, where essentially this entire city's fabric is built upon immigration and how those immigrant stories and immigrants' cultures shaped, redefined, and now created this brand as New York. And, you know, and is that just a uniquely an American phenomenon, or is that something that is really global? And yeah, so that was kind of like the premise, and that's kind of what I really want to explore more. Because I mean, you know, yeah, you're an Indian, right? You're Bengali, but the country of Bangladesh didn't exist 100 years ago. Where if anything, like the country of India, the subcontinent was like, yo, the Brits came in and was like, all right, cool. Let's like, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, and let's build a railroad. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's you know what I mean? Like it was a bunch of micro kingdoms and tribes, and they were like, okay, now y'all just Indians now. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So that's so if you look at like even within that subcontinent, there's all these different third cultures mixing, remixing, that's vastly different and that's constantly evolving. You know what I mean? So, you know, when I was in Prato, I learned that Chinese moved in during the 80s. But before the Chinese became the major workforce that were participants in the garment industry, it was Southern Italians, because you know, Florence is more on the north. So it was Southern Italians that the Northern Italians would call Moroqueños, which is a derogatory term saying that, yo, you're dark skinned. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So you look like a Moroccan. Like it's like
Oh,
a
wow.
straight up racist term
Yeah.
that would, you know, like, yeah, like that they would use that to call other Italians, basically.
Wow.
So so if you look at it from a macro lens, like all cultures are really third cultures, but at least from a modern era, because of because of technology and because of the fluency of well, because of the access to now global transportation in places like Japan, now you're gonna see a Bangladeshi Japanese couple getting married, or or specifically in Queens, like
Yeah.
when I was going to school, like my table were more it was like the United Nations, but it was more like monoculture, right? So it was like, oh, we got a Korean guy, a Jamaican guy, a Colombian guy. I went back to my school. This was almost like 7, 8 years ago. And I'm looking at the landscape of the classroom. So I asked this one kid, it's like, yo, what's your ethnic background? It's like, yo, I'm Dominican and Chinese. And I was like, how the fuck that happened? You know what I mean? And this other kid is like, yo, I'm Greek and Hungarian. I was like, what? Like, it's like the remixes are happening in a way that is unexpected now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, hell
And
yeah.
you're gonna start seeing a lot more of that, right? And that's what makes America great. So that's pretty much like my pitch to a network exec if anybody wants to green light my show Third Cultures.
Well,
You know what I mean?
I think it's an excellent concept and an excellent idea, and I think it should be out there as a show. All right, Jakey. I usually ask something more introspective to end off.
Yeah.
What excites you about this future?
Wow, that's a very broad question. Yeah, like I think currently the political climate in the US, um and the US political climate has a direct impact in the global political, economic, just the dynamics of it all, right? So it's an interesting time, right? Um, but I always try to look at the upside, right? Because like, our parents, grandparents, and our ancestors went through some shit. You know what I mean? Like, so I still try to look at it from that lens. Like, okay, cool. In this moment of AI disruption, this political upheaval, how do we navigate and how do we just continuously retain our sanity and humanity? Um, and for me, the answer that I found for myself was focusing on building a community. And you do that through constant communication, and the communication tools are now more readily available than ever. Even this conversation that we're having, like 15 years ago, it probably wouldn't have happened, let alone like 10 years ago, it probably wouldn't have happened, right? Because, you hit me on the DM and I replied, right? Now the access to this type of moments are much more organic and accessible. So, um, and I think building these communities are the only way for us to, I want to say combat, but to retain what we perceive as a sense of being human. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, that's kind of what I'm excited about. You know what I mean? Is the fact that as much as it's concerning and as much as it's, because like people fear what they don't understand, right? But a lot of opportunities always happen during moments of disruption. So uh either you see the wave coming and you're like, fuck, like, like, yo, like, this is it. Or you try to figure out, like, all right, cool. Like, let me get a board together. Let me see if I could surf this shit. You know what I mean? Let me see if I could float a little longer. And I'm trying to do the latter. And I think that's what's keeping me excited. I know it sounds a little morbid and you know apocalyptic, but the fact that like, yo, like everything that is happening, it feels like a lot of what we like, it feels like the world that we thought we were going to inherit is crumbling. But I just want to I always remind folks that, yo, like our grandparents survived wars, bro. You know what I mean? Like, and not saying that the wars are not happening right now. There's, whether it's in Ukraine or in Palestine or, Bhutan. I mean, not Bhutan. I mean, Burma or, there's wars happening and conflicts happening everywhere around the world. But if you are a privileged North American, intellectual with disposable income that lives in one of the most highest GDP concentrated cities, like we've already won the lottery. You know what I'm saying? So look at the upside.
I like how you phrased
We
it.
are on a Friday night on a Riverside call talking about fucking jazz records.
Yeah. Yeah.
How privileged are we, bro? You know what I mean?
I'm going to the Whitney Museum after this for
This is
free.
exactly
Life could be worse.
like how privileged are we, man? You know what I mean? So I try to take it in stride, man, and try to always be thankful of where we are.
I appreciate your positivity, and I see nothing but success for you in a way that's meaningful to you. Thanks for your time, Jaeki.
Thank you so much for your time, man. Appreciate you for hearing me out.
That was awesome. All right, peace.
Peace.
Just give me 30 seconds of your time. Firstly, a huge thank you for checking out the show. This started off as an idea in my mind to see the growth and the support from the beat digging community from around the world has been fantastic. Secondly, if you support what we do here, take a moment and join the 19% of listeners and subscribe on this app. It makes a huge difference. And my promise to you is to grow this show to make it even more of what you love. More guests, more interesting conversation, more beat digging knowledge. We appreciate your support. Peace.